The wind howled like a dying thing across the Wyoming plains, driving snow horizontal through the darkness. Evelyn Rowan pressed her face to the frosted kitchen window, watching 3 riders emerge from the blizzard like specters from hell. Even through the storm, she recognized the lead figure's black coat and silver badge. Sheriff Abram Voss had come calling at midnight, and men like Voss didn't make social visits. Her swollen belly, 8 months heavy with child, pressed against the windowsill as another contraction seized her. Not now, she thought desperately. Not with him here. The baby kicked hard as if sensing her fear, and she bit back a gasp of pain. Behind her, 10-year-old Miriam crept down the stairs in her nightgown, dark eyes wide with the intelligence that had kept their family alive these past 6 months. 7-year-old Caleb huddled by the dying fire, clutching the wooden horse his dead father had carved him. "Mama," Miriam whispered, "who's coming?" Before Evelyn could answer, Voss's fist hammered against the door. 3 sharp raps like nails being driven into a coffin. Ms. Rowan opened up official business. Evelyn's hands shook as she reached for her husband's rifle above the mantel. Thomas had been the finest shot in Coldwater County, but Thomas was 6 feet under the frozen ground, and his pregnant wife could barely lift the weapon. Another contraction twisted through her stronger than before. The baby was coming weeks early, and the storm had cut them off from help. Mrs. Granger, the midwife, lived 12 miles away through drifts that would swallow a horse. "I know you're in there." Voss's voice carried the authority of the badge and the menace of the gun beneath his coat. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Miriam moved to her mother's side, small hands surprisingly steady. "What does he want?" "What he's always wanted." Evelyn checked the rifle's load with trembling fingers. 6 months since Thomas's accident, and Voss's visits had grown bolder, his suggestions more indecent. A woman alone needed protection, he'd said, especially a woman in her condition. The memory made her skin crawl. "Mama." Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm scared." "I know, baby. But we're going to be brave, just like Daddy taught us." She opened the door just wide enough to show the rifle barrel. Through the gap, Voss's pale eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. "Evening, Mrs. Rowan. Terrible night to be out, but duty calls." His smile was thin as January ice. "We're tracking a dangerous fugitive, Jonah Ashford. You might know him from the wanted posters." "Never heard of him." The lie came easily. She'd seen the posters tacked to every building in Coldwater. "Murder and theft, $500 reward." "That's curious." Voss stepped closer, forcing her back a step. "Because my sources tell me you might be harboring him. And harboring a fugitive is a serious crime, Mrs. Rowan. The kind that gets children taken from unfit mothers." The threat hit her like a physical blow. Evelyn's grip tightened on the rifle, but another contraction chose that moment to seize her. She doubled over, gasping, and the weapon clattered to the floor. Voss was through the door before she could recover, his deputies flanking him like wolves. The warmth of the house seemed to shrink around his presence. "Search the place," he ordered. "Turn it inside out. Wait." Evelyn struggled upright, one hand pressed to her belly. "You can't just—" "I can do whatever the law allows. And the law gives me broad discretion in matters of public safety." His pale eyes took in her condition, the frightened children, the shabby furniture. "A woman in your circumstances can't afford to be uncooperative." Deputy Carson, a thin man with nervous eyes and a quick trigger finger, emerged from the kitchen. "Nothing down here, Sheriff. Want me to check upstairs?" "Do it." As Carson's boots thundered overhead, Voss settled into Thomas's chair like he owned it. His gaze lingered on Miriam, and something in his expression made Evelyn's blood turn to ice water. "My pretty girl," he said conversationally. "Be a shame if she ended up in one of those territorial orphanages. Rough places, rough men running them. Touch my children, and I'll kill you." The words came out low and steady, carrying the weight of absolute truth. Voss laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "With what you can barely stand up, let alone fight. Face facts, Mrs. Rowan. You need a man's protection. I'm offering it. Get out of my house. Your house. He pulled a folded document from his coat. According to Mr. Webb at the bank, you're 3 months behind on the mortgage. One more missed payment and this place gets foreclosed. Where will you go then? What will you do? The paper was real. She could see the bank's official seal. Cornelius Webb had been pressuring her for months, making it clear that a widow's promises meant nothing without a man to back them up. Carson's boots descended the stairs, and with them came a different sound. Heavy breathing. The scrape of boots that didn't belong to the deputy. Evelyn's heart stopped. From the upstairs hallway came a man's voice strained with pain. Let the woman alone, Voss. The sheriff's pale eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Well, Jonah Ashford. I wondered where you'd gotten to. The man who stumbled down the stairs was maybe 35, with dark hair matted with blood, and 3 days of hard riding carved into his hollow cheeks. His left shoulder was soaked black with blood, but his gray eyes were sharp with pain and something deeper. Guilt, maybe. Or determination. Carson had his gun pressed to the stranger's neck, but the wounded man moved like he'd forgotten about dying. His attention was fixed entirely on Voss, and the hatred in his expression could have melted snow. Abraham Vance, Jonah said, using a name that made Voss's smile falter. Still hiding behind false badges and forged credentials. Careful, Ashford. That sedition you're speaking could be construed as resisting arrest. By a wanted murderer playing at being sheriff, I don't think so. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Evelyn looked between the two men, trying to understand what she was seeing. Voss's hand had moved to his pistol while Jonah swayed on his feet but kept talking. How many people in Coldwater know their sheriff is really Abraham Vance? Wanted for murder in Kansas, theft in Colorado, fraud in Nebraska. That the territorial governor who endorsed his appointment is part of the same criminal syndicate. Shut your mouth. Voss was on his feet now, his cultivated calm cracking like ice in spring. Carson, gag him. But Carson was staring at his boss with new eyes. Sheriff, is that true about your name? Don't be an idiot. He's a wanted fugitive. They'll say anything to... His words cut off as Jonah pulled something from his shirt. A badge, real silver, real authority, with a territorial marshal's seal clear as daylight. Deputy United States Marshal Jonah Ashford. He said, his voice carrying despite his wounds. And you, Abraham Vance, are under arrest for conspiracy murder and impersonating a federal officer. The silence that followed was broken only by the wind howling around the house and Evelyn's labored breathing. Then Voss drew his gun. I don't think so. The shot was impossibly loud in the small room. Jonah spun and went down, fresh blood spreading across his shirt. Miriam screamed. Caleb dove behind the sofa. And Evelyn felt something inside her break, not her spirit, but something deeper. The part of her that had been willing to compromise with evil. You son of a bitch. She lunged for the fallen rifle, her pregnant body moving with desperate fury. You murdering bastard. Voss's second shot splintered wood inches from her head. Careful, Mrs. Rowan. Wouldn't want the children to see their mother die too. But Evelyn was beyond caution now. 6 months of fear, of threats, of watching her children slowly starve while corrupt men stole their future, it all crystallized into pure rage. She got her hands on the rifle, just as another contraction hit, doubling her over with its violence. The baby's coming, she gasped. Dear God, it's coming now. Voss looked at the blood pooling beneath Jonah, at Evelyn writhing on the floor, at the two terrified children. His pale eyes calculated odds and angles, weighing profit against risk. Carson, he said finally, burn the barn. Sheriff, you heard me. And if anyone asks, it was Ashford who set the fire. Last act of a desperate fugitive. The deputy hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the escalation. What about the woman and the kids? Accidents happen during arrests. Fugitives get desperate, make bad choices. Sometimes innocent people get hurt. The meaning was clear as church bells. Voss intended to kill them all and blame it on the dead marshal. No witnesses, no complications, just another tragic story about law enforcement gone wrong. Carson looked sick, but he was weak-willed and owned by stronger men. He started toward the door, then stopped as a new voice cut through the storm. "Sheriff Voss, you in there?" More riders were approaching through the blizzard. But these weren't Voss's men. Evelyn could hear a woman's voice among them, sharp with authority. "Shit." Voss moved to the window, peering through the frost. "Mrs. Granger, what's that old bitch doing out in this weather?" The midwife had come after all, drawn by some instinct or worried by the storm. And she'd brought help. Evelyn could see at least 3 other figures through the swirling snow. "A change of plans," Voss said. "We take the woman and children with us. Ashford stays here to burn. He's already dead, Sheriff. That second shot? No." Jonah's voice was weak but audible. Not yet. He was trying to push himself upright, leaving a smear of blood on the floorboards. His face was gray with blood loss, but his eyes still burned with that terrible determination. "Amazing what it takes to kill a federal marshal," Voss observed. "But we'll get there." He raised his pistol for a finishing shot just as Mrs. Granger hammered on the door. "Evelyn, open up, child. I can hear you screaming from here." The interruption gave Jonah the seconds he needed. With his last strength, he rolled toward the fireplace and grabbed a burning log with his bare hand. The wood hissed against his palm, but he hurled it at the oil lamp hanging near the window. Glass shattered. Oil splattered. Flames leapt up the curtains with hungry enthusiasm. "You crazy bastard." Voss fired again, but the shot went wide as smoke began filling the room. "Carson, get them out of here." But Carson was backing toward the door, his nerve finally broken. "This is too much, Sheriff. I didn't sign on for killing pregnant women and children. You signed on for whatever I tell you to sign on for." Voss grabbed Miriam by the arm, hauling the girl against his chest. She struggled, but he was too strong. His pistol found her temple, and she went very still. "Everyone calm down." He set his voice steady again. "Mrs. Rowan, you're coming with me. Children, too. We'll sort this mess out somewhere private." "Let her go." Evelyn struggled to her knees, another contraction making her sob with pain. "She's just a child." So was the deputy marshal's daughter in Kansas. "Didn't stop me, then won't stop me now." The casual admission of child murder hung in the smoke-filled air like a curse. Outside, Mrs. Granger was shouting for help, organizing her companions to break down the door. But they were too late. Voss dragged Miriam toward the back of the house, gesturing for Carson to grab Caleb. The flames were spreading faster now, licking at the wooden walls with greedy tongues. "Move here," Voss ordered. "Out the back, horses are waiting." That's when Jonah made his final play. The wounded marshal had been crawling across the floor while everyone's attention was on the hostages. Now he reached Thomas's gun cabinet, smashed the glass with his elbow, and pulled out a shotgun. His hands shook as he broke it open, but muscle memory from years of law enforcement guided his fingers. "Let the girl go, Vance." Voss spun Miriam, still pressed against his chest. "You don't have the strength to pull that trigger. Try me." For a heartbeat, they faced each other across the burning room, the corrupt sheriff and the dying marshal with an innocent child caught between them. Smoke swirled around them, like the ghosts of everyone Voss had killed. Then the front door exploded inward, and Mrs. Granger burst through with 3 armed men behind her. The midwife was a small, fierce woman in her 60s, but she carried her father's cavalry saber and the authority of someone who delivered half the babies in Coldwater County. "What in hell is going on here?" she demanded, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "Evelyn's in labor, the house is on fire, and you're all standing around waving guns like idiots." Her presence changed everything. Carson immediately dropped his weapon and raised his hands. The other men, farmers and ranchers Evelyn recognized, spread out to block the exits. But Voss still had Miriam, and desperate men made dangerous choices. "Stay back." he warned, pressing the gun harder against the girl's head. I'll kill her. I swear I'll kill her. No. The voice was small but steady. Miriam looked directly at her mother, her young face calm despite the terror. He won't shoot me, Mama. He needs us alive. Smart girl, Mrs. Granger observed. Takes after her mother. She began moving slowly toward Voss, her saber held low, but ready. You must be the famous Sheriff Voss, though I hear that's not your real name. I'm a duly appointed peace officer. You're a murdering bastard who's been terrorizing decent folks for months. The midwife's voice cut like winter wind. And now you're threatening children. That's where I draw the line. What happened next took maybe 3 seconds, but Evelyn would remember it for the rest of her life in perfect crystalline detail. Mrs. Granger fainted left, drawing Voss's attention. Miriam, displaying courage beyond her years, drove her elbow into the sheriff's stomach and twisted away. Jonah, bleeding and dying, but not yet dead, pulled both triggers of the shotgun. The blast was deafening. Voss's scream cut off abruptly as buckshot took him center mass, hurling him backward through the window in a shower of glass and blood. Carson threw down his remaining weapon and fell to his knees. Don't shoot, I surrender. I never wanted any part of this. But Evelyn barely heard him. Another contraction was tearing through her, this one different from all the others. Deeper. Final. The baby was coming, whether the house was burning or not. Mrs. Granger, she gasped, help me. The midwife was already moving her experienced hands, taking charge. You men get this fire out, and someone check on that marshal, he's lost too much blood. As chaos swirled around her, Evelyn felt herself slipping into the ancient rhythm of birth. Pain and pressure, fear and hope, the eternal dance of new life entering a dangerous world. Outside, the storm was breaking. Inside, flames crackled and men shouted, and a baby prepared to take its first breath. And in the corner, Deputy Marshal Jonah Ashford smiled once and closed his eyes. Dawn came gray and cold, painting the snow-covered plains in shades of ash and silver. The house still stood, though smoke damage had blackened the walls and broken windows let in the winter wind. The barn was a total loss. Carson had managed to set it ablaze before his nerve failed him. But they were alive, all of them. Evelyn lay in her own bed, exhausted but triumphant, nursing the daughter who'd entered the world in fire and chaos. The baby was small but healthy, with Thomas's dark hair and her mother's stubborn chin. What will you call her? Mrs. Granger asked, tidying the room with brisk efficiency. Grace. Evelyn touched the infant's cheek, marveling at the softness. Thomas wanted to name a daughter Grace. Good name. She'll need it in this world. Miriam sat beside the bed, her ordeal of the night before, visible only in the way she stayed close to her mother. Caleb had finally stopped crying and fallen asleep on the floor, clutching his wooden horse. Is he dead? Miriam asked quietly. Mr. Ashford? Mrs. Granger's expression was grim. Near as makes no difference. Lost too much blood, and that last effort took everything he had left. I'm surprised he lasted this long. Can I see him? Child, he's not conscious. Hasn't been since. Please. Something in the girl's voice made the midwife nod. They found Jonah in the parlor, laid out on the sofa where Mrs. Granger had done her best to patch his wounds. His breathing was shallow, his face gray as old paper, but his eyes opened when Miriam approached. Hey there, brave girl. His voice was barely a whisper. You did good last night. Real good. Are you going to die? The directness of the question would have flustered most adults, but Jonah just smiled. Probably. But that's okay. Sometimes people die so other people can live. Your daddy understood that. You knew Daddy. We were working together, trying to stop bad men from hurting good families. He was... Jonah coughed and blood flecked his lips. He was the bravest man I ever met. Miriam was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then, will you tell me about him? About what he did? if I can. So as the sun rose over Coldwater County, a dying federal marshal told a 10-year-old girl the story her father had died protecting. About corruption that reached from territorial capitals to frontier towns. About men who used badges and legal documents to steal land from honest settlers. About a rancher who discovered the conspiracy and tried to expose it. He had evidence, Jonah whispered. Documents that would have brought down the whole network. But they found out about our investigation. What happened to the evidence? Jonah's eyes moved to Evelyn, who'd been listening from the doorway. He hid it. Said if anything happened to him, I should tell you to look for the lockbox. What lockbox? That's what I've been trying to figure out. He said you'd know where it was when the time came. But Evelyn didn't know. Thomas had kept his secrets well, protecting her, even from his own heroism. Now she was supposed to find evidence she didn't know existed to complete a mission she'd never been told about. Mrs. Rowan. Deputy Carson stood in the doorway, hands bound but voice urgent. I need to tell you something about what Voss Vance was really after. She looked at the man who'd been ready to burn her barn and kill her children. Why should I listen to you? Because there's more coming. This wasn't just about your husband's evidence. There's a whole network of them, and when they find out Voss is dead, they'll send someone else. Mrs. Granger snorted. Let them come. Half the county knows the truth now. You don't understand. Carson's voice carried the weight of genuine fear. The man Voss answered to, he's got resources you can't imagine. Private armies bought judges, politicians in his pocket. He won't just send another crooked sheriff. He'll send killers. Evelyn felt ice forming in her stomach. Who's behind all this? Cornelius Webb's just a front man. The real power is Marcus Aldrich owns half the railroad and most of the territorial government. He's been buying up Wyoming land cheap, planning to sell it to Eastern investors for 10 times what he paid. The name meant nothing to Evelyn, but Jonah's eyes widened. Aldrich. That bastard's been bleeding the territory dry for years. We could never get enough evidence to touch him. That's what your husband was trying to do. Carson continued. He'd found documents linking Aldrich to dozens of illegal foreclosures, fraudulent land sales, even murder. Voss was supposed to get those documents and kill anyone who'd seen them. But Thomas hid them. Yeah. And now Aldrich knows you might have access to them. He won't stop until you're dead, or he has that evidence. The implications hit Evelyn like a physical blow. Even with Voss dead, her family wasn't safe. They were still targets, still marked for death by men with unlimited resources and no conscience. How long, she asked. Maybe a week, maybe less. Depends on how long it takes word to reach Cheyenne. She looked at her newborn daughter, at Miriam and Caleb, at the dying marshal who'd given everything to protect them. A week to find evidence she'd never seen, to prepare for enemies she couldn't count, to somehow survive against overwhelming odds. But as she held baby Grace and felt the tiny heart beating against her chest, Evelyn realized something had changed inside her. The scared widow who'd hesitated to open her door was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. She was Thomas Rowan's wife, Miriam and Caleb's mother, Grace's protector. And anyone who threatened her family would learn what that meant. Mrs. Granger, she said quietly, how quickly can you spread word to the other ranchers, the honest ones? Hour, maybe 2. Why? Because we're going to war. The War Council convened in the Hendersons' barn, 15 miles from the Rowan homestead. Word had spread through the network of honest ranchers and farmers who'd been wondering for months why their neighbors kept disappearing, why the bank kept foreclosing on profitable spreads, why the territorial government seemed determined to drive them off their land. Now they knew. Evelyn sat nursing baby Grace, while Mrs. Granger presented the evidence they'd assembled. Carson, facing a choice between cooperation and a rope, had provided names, dates, methods. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering: dozens of officials, hundreds of illegal transactions, thousands of acres stolen from legitimate settlers. "So what do we do?" asked Jake Henderson, a bear of a man who'd lost his best pasture to foreclosure the previous month. "Can't trust the law. Half the badges in the territory are bought and paid for." "We make our own law," said Martha Crenshaw, whose husband had died in a suspicious hunting accident after questioning the bank's practices. "Like our grandfathers did." "That's vigilante talk, Martha. Could get us all hanged." "I'll buy who? The same corrupt judges who've been stealing our land." The debate raged for an hour, voices rising as fear and anger battled for control. These were decent people, law-abiding folk who'd never thought they'd be discussing armed resistance against their own government. But decent people had limits, and those limits had been crossed. "There is another way," Jonah said quietly from his makeshift bed in the corner. Mrs. Granger had moved him to the Henderson place, though everyone knew he was dying by degrees. "If we can find Thomas's evidence, we can get it to the federal authorities in Washington. Bypass the territorial government entirely, if the evidence exists," Henderson pointed out. "And if we can find it before Aldrich's killers show up, it exists." Evelyn's voice carried absolute certainty. Thomas was too thorough, too careful to die without leaving proof behind. "We just have to think the way he thought." She'd been turning the problem over in her mind for hours, trying to see the world through her dead husband's eyes. Thomas had been a methodical man, someone who planned 3 moves ahead and always had a backup for his backup. If he'd hidden evidence, it wouldn't be somewhere obvious. But it also wouldn't be somewhere she couldn't find it, because he'd known she might need it someday. "The family Bible," she said suddenly. "Ma'am," Henderson looked confused. "Thomas always said the most important things should be written in the family Bible. I thought he meant births and deaths, but maybe—" She looked at Miriam, who was listening with the intense attention of a child forced to grow up too quickly. "Honey, do you remember your father working on anything special before he died? Writing letters maybe, or going through old papers?" The girl thought carefully. "He was fixing the root cellar. Said the walls needed reinforcing for winter. But he spent more time down there than he needed to, and he wouldn't let me help." The root cellar. Evelyn felt pieces clicking together in her mind. Of course. Hidden in plain sight, but somewhere only family would think to look. Mrs. Granger was already reaching for her coat. "I'll get some men together. We can search it tonight." "No." Evelyn stood still holding the baby. "If there are watchers out there, a search party would draw attention. I need to go alone." "The hell you will," the midwife said bluntly. "You just gave birth 24 hours ago. You're in no condition to—" "I'm in no condition to lose my children to killers." Evelyn's voice carried the steel that had been growing in her since Thomas's death. "This is my fight, my family, my responsibility." "Then I'm going with you." Miriam stepped forward, her young face set with determination. "If Daddy hid something in our root cellar, I should be there when you find it." "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than staying here while killers come looking for us." The girl had inherited her father's logic, along with his courage. "Besides, I know that cellar better than anyone. I played down there when I was little." Evelyn wanted to refuse to keep her daughter safe and innocent for just a little longer. But innocence was a luxury they could no longer afford, and Miriam had already proven herself braver than most adults. "All right," she said finally. "But we go at midnight when the moon's dark. And if anything goes wrong, anything at all, you run. Don't look back, don't try to help me, just run." "I'm not leaving you, Mama." "You will if I tell you to. Because protecting your brother and sister is more important than protecting me." It was a harsh truth, but Miriam was old enough to understand harsh truths. She nodded reluctantly, and Evelyn felt another piece of her heart break for the childhood her daughter was losing. But there would be time for grief later. Right now, there was only survival. The meeting broke up with plans for mutual defense and promises to watch each other's backs. If Aldrich sent killers, they'd find the territory less welcoming than expected. As the other families departed, Evelyn sat with Jonah in the quiet barn. His breathing was more labored now, his color worse. Death was coming for him, and they both knew it. "I should have protected him better," he said suddenly. "Your husband should have seen the trap coming. You couldn't have known. It was my job to know. I was the federal marshal, the one with experience. He was just a rancher trying to do right." Jonah coughed and more blood stained his lips. "I've failed a lot of people, Mrs. Rowan. Don't want to fail you too. You haven't failed anyone. You fought corruption when it would have been easier to look away. You've protected my family when you could have run. That's not failure, that's heroism." Heroism. He laughed bitterly. Heroes don't die bleeding in borrowed barns, while killers hunt innocent women and children. Heroes do whatever they have to do, just like my Thomas did, just like you're doing now. She took his hand, feeling how cold his fingers had become. "Tell me about him. About how you met what you planned together. I need to understand what he died for." So, as night fell over the Wyoming plains, a dying federal marshal told a widow about her husband's final months, about secret meetings and careful investigations, about the courage it took to stand against corruption when corruption wore badges and carried the law's authority. "He loved you," Jonas said as his voice grew weaker. "Talked about you and the children constantly. Said you were the strongest woman he'd ever met, that you could handle anything if you had to. I don't feel strong. Strong people never do. That's what makes them strong." Outside, the wind was picking up again, promising another storm. But this time, Evelyn wasn't afraid of what the darkness might bring. She was ready to meet it head-on. Midnight came with fresh snow and a wind that cut through clothing like a knife. Evelyn and Miriam made their way across the frozen fields, moving slowly to avoid detection. And because Evelyn's body was still recovering from childbirth, the homestead looked abandoned in the moonlight, its broken windows and smoke-stained walls telling the story of the previous night's violence. But appearances could be deceiving. If Aldrich had watchers in place, they'd be hidden where shadows gathered deepest. "There," Miriam whispered, pointing to a dark shape near the root cellar. "Someone's been here." She was right. Fresh footprints circled the cellar entrance, too many to count. Someone had already searched the obvious hiding places, which meant they were either very thorough or very lucky. Or they knew something Evelyn didn't. "Stay close," she murmured, drawing the pistol Mrs. Granger had insisted she carry. The weapon felt heavy and unfamiliar in her hands, but she'd learned to shoot as a girl, and muscle memory ran deep. The root cellar door was slightly ajar, which sent ice through Evelyn's veins. Thomas had been obsessive about keeping it properly sealed. Moisture and vermin were constant threats to stored food. She lifted the door carefully, listening for any sound from below. Nothing but the whisper of cold air and the smell of earth and preserved vegetables. "Mama." Miriam tugged at her sleeve. "Look." The girl was pointing at the door frame where someone had scratched marks in the wood. Fresh marks made with a knife blade. They looked random at first glance, but Evelyn's heart stopped as she recognized the pattern. Thomas's mark. The symbol he'd carved into fence posts and barn beams to mark his property. He'd been here somehow. Impossibly he'd been here after his death. Then understanding hit her like lightning. "He knew," she whispered. "Somehow he knew they were coming for him. He came here that last night before he went to meet." She couldn't finish the sentence, but Miriam understood. "He hid the evidence after you went to bed, while we were all sleeping." They descended into the cellar together, Evelyn holding a shielded lantern, while Miriam examined the walls with a child's attention to detail. The space was larger than it looked from above, carved deep into the hillside and lined with stone. "Here." Miriam's voice was excited but controlled. This stone's different from the others. She was right. One of the wall stones sat slightly proud of its neighbors, as if it had been removed and replaced recently. Evelyn set down the lantern and worked her fingers around the edges, trying to find purchase. The stone came free with surprising ease, revealing a hollow space behind it. Her fingers found metal, a small strongbox, exactly like the one Thomas had kept their important papers in. But as she pulled it free, she heard something that turned her blood to ice. Footsteps above them, trying to move quietly, but still audible to ears sharpened by fear. "Blow out the lantern," she whispered urgently. Miriam obeyed instantly, plunging them into absolute darkness. The footsteps paused directly above the cellar entrance, and Evelyn could hear voices, at least 2 men, maybe more. "You sure they came this way? Tracks lead right here, fresh ones." "Could be a trap. Rowan woman's got friends in the area." "Not anymore." Aldrich made sure of that. The words sent ice through Evelyn's heart. What had happened to the other families? The Hendersons, the Crenshaws, all the people who'd pledged to stand together. "Check the cellar, I'll watch the house." A lantern appeared at the cellar entrance, casting long shadows down the stone steps. Heavy boots began descending, and Evelyn knew they had seconds before discovery. The cellar had one advantage. It was bigger than it looked, with several alcoves carved into the walls for different types of storage. She grabbed Miriam's hand and pulled her toward the deepest corner, where barrels of preserved meat created a maze of hiding places. But the strongbox was still in her other hand, and it was heavier than she'd expected. If she dropped it, the sound would give them away. If she kept it, it would slow them down. The choice was simple and terrible. "Take this," she whispered, pressing the box into Miriam's hands. "If something happens to me, get it to Marshal Ashford. Or to Mrs. Granger. Someone who can use it." "Mama, no. Go. Now." "There's a loose stone in the back wall behind the grain barrels. It leads to an old mine shaft. Your father showed it to me once, said it was an escape route if we ever needed one." The lantern light was getting closer, and she could hear the searchers breathing. Big man moving carefully, but not quietly enough. He was maybe 20 feet away now, sweeping the light methodically across every corner. "Mama," Miriam whispered, barely audible. "Go, that's an order." The girl hesitated for one heartbreaking moment, then disappeared into the shadows, with the strongbox clutched against her chest. Evelyn heard the faint scrape of stone on stone as Miriam found the hidden passage, then silence. Her daughter was safe. Now she had to make sure she stayed that way. The lantern beam swept across the alcove where they'd been hiding, finding nothing but empty barrels and shadows. But the searcher was thorough. He moved closer, checking every possible hiding place. Evelyn pressed herself against the cold stone wall, the pistol heavy in her hand. She'd never killed anyone, never even pointed a gun at another human being. But as she thought of her children of the future, Aldrich's men wanted to steal from them, her finger found the trigger. "I know you're down here," the man said conversationally. His voice carried the flat accent of professional violence, someone who killed for money and felt nothing about it. "Saw your tracks in the snow. You and the girl both." He was maybe 10 feet away now, close enough that she could smell tobacco and unwashed clothes. The lantern light danced across the stone walls, creating moving shadows that might hide her for a few more seconds. "Come out peaceful-like, and maybe we can work something out. Mr. Aldrich isn't unreasonable. You give us what we want, we let you and the children disappear somewhere safe." The lie was obvious as sunrise, but Evelyn didn't waste breath calling him on it. Men like this only understood one language, and words weren't part of it. "Of course, if you make this difficult." The killer's voice turned ugly. "Well, there's more than one way to get information out of a woman. And that daughter of yours is pretty enough to fetch a good price in certain markets." The threat broke something inside Evelyn's chest, not her courage, but her restraint. She stepped out of the shadows, with the pistol raised, her voice steady as winter stone. "Try it." The killer spun toward her voice, bringing up his own weapon, but Evelyn had the advantage of knowing where he was. Her first shot took him center mass, spinning him around. Her second shot put him down permanently. The gunshots were impossibly loud in the confined space, echoing off stone walls like thunder. Above her, she heard shouts of alarm and running footsteps. More men converging on the cellar entrance. Charlie, you all right down there? She had maybe seconds before they came down to investigate. The smart thing would be to follow Miriam through the hidden passage to run while she still could. But running meant leaving her newborn daughter and infant son at the Henderson place, where other killers might already be waiting. And it meant letting Aldrich's men know about the hidden passage, cutting off their escape route. Sometimes the smart choice wasn't the right choice. Evelyn reloaded the pistol with hands that barely shook, then positioned herself where she could cover the cellar entrance. When the first man started down the steps, she put a bullet through his leg. He fell with a scream, tumbling into his companion, and creating a tangle of cursing, bleeding confusion. "The bitch is armed," someone shouted from above. "Tommy's hit bad. So's Charlie. She killed Charlie." The voices multiplied as more men arrived. She counted at least 6 different speakers, maybe more. Too many to fight, but maybe enough to negotiate with. "I've got something you want," she called up through the darkness. "The evidence Thomas Rowan hid. But you'll have to come down and get it." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Gunfire erupted from the cellar entrance, bullets whining off stone walls and shattering preserved food jars. She pressed herself into the deepest alcove, praying the ricochet wouldn't find her. When the shooting stopped, a new voice spoke, cultured, educated, carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Mrs. Rowan, my name is Marcus Aldrich. I believe we have business to discuss." Even through her fear, Evelyn felt a chill of recognition. The man himself had come to Wyoming, which meant the situation was even more serious than she'd thought. "Let's keep this civilized," Aldrich continued. "You have something I need, and I have something you want: the continued existence of your children. Surely we can reach an accommodation. Like you reached an accommodation with my husband. Your husband was an idealist who didn't understand the realities of territorial development. I offered him a generous buyout for his land, and he chose to make difficulties instead." Evelyn laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Is that what you call murder, making difficulties? I call it the cost of progress. This territory will be civilized, Mrs. Rowan, with or without the cooperation of its current inhabitants. The only question is whether you'll be part of that civilization or buried beneath it." She could hear movement above, men positioning themselves around the cellar entrance, cutting off any escape route except the one Miriam had taken. They were professional killers, patient and methodical, willing to wait until she ran out of ammunition or options. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed she was trapped. "I've got a counteroffer," she called back. "You and your men get back on your horses and ride out of Wyoming. In return, I won't send copies of Thomas's evidence to every newspaper between here and Washington." Aldrich's laughter was genuine and deeply unpleasant. "My dear woman, you're hardly in a position to make threats. You're alone, outnumbered, and cornered in a hole in the ground." "Am I?" The question hung in the cold air for a moment, before being answered by gunfire from an entirely different direction. The shots came from the ridge above the homestead, where the old mining road provided perfect cover for marksmen. "What the hell?" Aldrich's cultivated calm cracked as his men began shouting in confusion and pain. More shots from at least 3 different positions. Someone screamed high and desperate. Boots ran across frozen ground, seeking cover that wasn't there. Ambush were surrounded. Evelyn's heart leaped with hope and terror. Someone was out there fighting for her family, but she had no idea who or how many. If it was the other ranchers, they were risking everything on a desperate gamble. "Mrs. Rowan." The voice that called her name was familiar, Mrs. Granger, sharp, with authority and determination. "You all right down there?" "I'm fine, but there are at least 6 of them up there." "Not anymore." The shooting intensified, becoming a full battle between Aldrich's killers and whoever had come to help. Evelyn pressed herself against the stone wall, listening to the chaos above, and trying to count muzzle flashes. A body fell through the cellar entrance landing with a wet thud on the stone steps. One of Aldrich's men, blood spreading from multiple wounds. He was still breathing, but barely. Fall back. Aldrich's voice was sharp with panic now. To the horse's move, but his retreat was cut short by a new sound, the distinctive boom of a shotgun fired at close range. Someone screamed, then silence. Aldrich. Mrs. Granger's voice carried clearly through the night air. Marcus Aldrich, you're under arrest by order of the Territorial Marshal. A pause, then Aldrich's reply strained but still defiant. What Marshal? Ashford's dead. Not quite. The new voice was weak but unmistakable. Jonah somehow still alive, somehow still fighting. Deputy, U.S. Marshal, Jonah Ashford. You're under arrest for conspiracy murder and about a dozen other federal crimes. You're dying, Ashford. Been dying for days. Maybe, but I'm taking you with me. Another shotgun blast, followed by a cry of pain and rage. Then silence that stretched like a held breath. Evelyn waited in the darkness, listening for any sound that might tell her who'd won the battle above. Her ammunition was running low, her body was exhausted from childbirth and terror, and she had no idea if help was really coming or if this was just another trap. Then she heard footsteps on the cellar stairs, careful measured, accompanied by the soft glow of a shielded lantern. Evelyn, it's Martha Granger. You can come out now. She emerged from the shadows like a ghost, the pistol still ready in her hands. Mrs. Granger stood at the bottom of the steps, her dress torn and blood-stained, but her eyes fierce with victory. Is it over? Evelyn whispered. Near enough. Aldrich is dead and most of his men with him. The survivors are tied up and talking faster than auctioneers. The midwife's smile was grim but satisfied. Seems like they've got a lot to confess. How did you know to come? That girl of yours. Brave little thing came running through the snow carrying a strong box and shouting about killers at the homestead. We gathered every gun in the county and rode hard. Evelyn felt tears of relief and pride burning her eyes. Miriam had done exactly what needed doing. She'd gotten the evidence to safety and brought help when it mattered most. The children, safe, all of them. Your babies with the Henderson women and the older ones are helping tend the wounded. Mrs. Granger's expression grew serious. Speaking of which, you need to see Marshal Ashford. He's asking for you. They found Jonah propped against a tree near the homestead, wrapped in blankets and surrounded by evidence of the brief, vicious battle. Bodies lay scattered in the snow, testament to what happened when professional killers met determined farmers protecting their families. Jonah was dying, that much was obvious from his color and the blood that flecked his lips with each breath. But his eyes were clear and focused when Evelyn knelt beside him. Did good, he whispered. You and the girl both. Thomas would be proud. Don't talk, save your strength. For what? His smile was peaceful, accepting. Job's done. Aldrich is dead. His network's broken. Your family's safe. He pressed something into her hand, a folded paper, official-looking and heavy with seals. Federal pardon, he explained. For anything you might have done tonight. Clean slate, fresh start. Evelyn looked at the document through tears. Thank you. For everything. Thank your husband. He started this. I just helped finish it. Jonah's breathing grew more labored, but he managed a few more words. The evidence in that strong box, it'll clean out half the territorial government. Going to be big changes coming. What about my family? Are we really safe now? Safe as anyone can be in this world. You've got good neighbors, good friends, and you've got... He coughed, blood bright on his lips. You've got the heart of a lioness. Your children will grow up strong. His eyes closed, and for a moment, Evelyn thought he was gone. Then they opened again, focusing on something beyond her shoulder. Thomas, he whispered, that you... And then he was still. The sun rose on a Wyoming morning, painted in shades of gold and crimson. And for the first time in months, Evelyn Rowan felt truly safe. The immediate danger was over. The corrupt network broke and the evidence secured. But more than that, she'd discovered something about herself and about the community she'd thought was powerless against corruption. The strongbox that had cost so much blood to recover contained everything Thomas had promised and more. Detailed records of land fraud lists of bought officials' correspondence proving the conspiracy reached all the way to Washington. It would take months to sort through it all, but the territorial government would never be the same. Mama. Miriam approached, carrying baby Grace with the competence of a child forced to grow up too quickly. Mrs. Henderson says we can stay with them until the house is repaired. That's kind of her. Evelyn took her daughter, marveling again at the miracle of new life in a world that seemed determined to destroy it. But I think we'll rebuild here. This is our land, our home. Even after all this, Evelyn looked around at the damaged homestead, the scattered evidence of violence, the graves they'd have to dig before the ground froze solid. It would have been easy to walk away, to start over somewhere safe and anonymous. But Thomas had died for this land, and Jonah had given his life to protect it. Running now would make their sacrifices meaningless, especially after all this. She said firmly, "This is where we belong." Caleb emerged from behind the burned barn, carrying his wooden horse and trying to look braver than his 7 years. "Will the bad men come back, Mama?" "No, baby. The bad men are gone for good." It was true as far as she could make it true. There would always be bad men, always be corruption and greed and violence. But there would also be good people willing to stand against them, communities willing to fight for what was right. Mrs. Granger approached with a steaming cup of coffee and the brisk manner of someone taking charge. "The territorial marshals sending investigators from Cheyenne. They'll want to talk to you about what happened. Will there be trouble about the shooting?" "Not likely. Jonah's report makes it clear you acted in self-defense, protecting your family from known criminals." The midwife's smile was dry. "Besides, half the territory is going to be grateful once word gets out about what Aldrich was doing." Over the following weeks, that prediction proved accurate. As news of the conspiracy spread, families came forward with their own stories of intimidation and theft. The evidence in Thomas's strongbox corroborated dozens of individual cases, building an unshakable case against the entire network. The territorial governor was arrested on federal charges. Bank President Cornelius Webb was found hanging in his office, whether from guilt or fear no one could say. Dozens of smaller officials fled the territory rather than face prosecution, and in Coldwater, Wyoming, the people began to rebuild not just their buildings and their lives, but their faith in the possibility of justice. Evelyn's homestead became a symbol of that rebuilding. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak out came to help repair the damage, to raise a new barn, to plant spring crops when the snow finally melted. The community that had seemed so fragmented and powerless proved to have deep roots and strong bonds. As spring turned to summer, baby Grace grew strong and healthy, her laughter filling the house with joy. Miriam blossomed into a young woman whose courage had been tested and proven. Caleb lost his fearfulness, gaining confidence from the knowledge that his family had faced the worst and survived. And Evelyn discovered that widowhood didn't have to mean loneliness, that strength could grow from tragedy, that love could expand to encompass not just family but community. On a warm evening in late summer, she sat on her rebuilt porch watching her children play in the yard. The graves of Thomas and Jonah were visible on the hill behind the house, two good men who'd paid the ultimate price for doing right. But their sacrifice hadn't been in vain. The territory was changing slowly but surely as honest officials replaced corrupt ones, and communities learned they had the power to protect themselves. A rider approached along the road, another neighbor, another friend, part of the network of mutual support that had grown from the ashes of corruption. There would always be challenges, always be people who tried to take advantage of others' weaknesses. But there would also be people willing to stand up to fight back, to protect what mattered most. Evelyn Rowan had learned that lesson in the hardest way possible. She'd paid for it with her husband's blood, nearly with her own life and her children's future. But the knowledge was worth the price. As the sun set over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in shades of promise, she held her baby daughter close and watched her older children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was for peace, for family, for the quiet satisfaction of a life rebuilt from the ruins of tragedy, for the knowledge that sometimes when good people stand together, justice can prevail. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of growing things and the promise of harvest. In the distance, lights began to appear in other homesteads, other families settling in for another peaceful night. Evelyn smiled, thinking of Thomas and how proud he would be of what they'd built from his sacrifice. The territory would be civilized, but on the terms of honest people rather than corrupt ones. That was legacy enough for any man. That was victory enough for any family. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Evelyn Rowan gathered her children and went inside to the home they'd fought so hard to keep. Behind them, the graves on the hill stood sentinel over a land finally at peace. The Coldwater reckoning was complete. The healing had begun. And in the end, that was the only story that truly mattered, not the one about corruption and violence and death, but the one about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when it mattered most. The one about family and community and the price of freedom. The one about how love in the end that always finds a way to triumph over evil.